tackle. I was going to pick that up. Yeah, well, this is going to be extremely interactive. I'm going to touch on a couple things that I was just going, oh, I want to talk more about this, that Nora was touched on, or that SB, although I'm going to give you a couple low-tech versions of some of the things he said. So that'll be another interesting thing. And the very first low-tech thing that I wanted to talk about was your name tag. Presenters, don't wear name tags when you get up here. I just thought it was like falling off and you kept messing with it. And I think a lot of times, I know, and we're very obedient as speakers, and we usually get there and they give you your name tag and we put it on obediently. And I tell people, get rid of a name tag when you're up here presenting because it's distracting to you. And so, you know, yeah. Even pinned on ones. I say, when you get up to speak, take it off because it will be a distraction to you. They're plastic, they're clip-on, they're pinned, they'll be sideways, and you'll see a video of yourself and your ribbon that says speaker is sticking out sideways or something random. So I always just say, get rid of the things that, like Nora said, take things out of your pockets and take name tags off. They're just nothing but a distraction. And people don't need to see your name when you're up here on your body. If they want to see your name, look in the brochure or whatever that you're speaking. So that was just something I was just going, I want to make a note of that because I think a lot of times we get up to speak at conferences and that happens. So I'm going to kind of go through, and I looked at a couple things that are presentation killers, and Nora touched on 10 of them that are, that can hurt our presentations. But it's interesting, in the National Speakers Association, they do a survey every year. Top things presenters do that kill presentations. And really they ask the audience and they say, what are the worst things presenters do? What would you say are some of the worst things presenters do?
Don't find out if the audience can hear them.
Oh, so they don't even check if the audience can hear them. That is bad. What else? Worst things in your opinion that, yes?
When they read their entire presentation.
Reading your presentation is number one. Internationally, number one thing that people hate. But here's what's interesting. Nora talked about it. Don't read your slides. We all talk about it. We hate when people read their slides. But every single presentation you go to, you will see people get up, and you will do it. You will put up slides, and you will be tempted to read your presentation. So it's just one of those things you have to hammer, and you have to create your slides so that you're not tempted. What else?
Well, actually, I was going to build on that just a little bit, if I can.
Yeah.
I wrote my column once on some research they did down in New South Wales that found that when the audience is hearing you say those words and they're reading them at the same time, it's just a little
disconnect.
too close in your mind, and it overcomes each other. So
there's really a process, and she's saying, there's lots of studies that have been done on the fact that we read at a different speed, and I'm going to actually talk about that. That it's a disconnect. So reading your slides. What else? Worst things you think presenters do?
Too many ahs. If you're in that group that I was in, the speakers group, and you or the ah counter, I was the Wizard of Oz when I started.
The Wizard of Oz.
26 in the first one.
And that was in the first minute?
Yeah. It was a 2-minute speech, yeah. But the thing is, when they really start doing it, like our president does too, that I don't hear anything in between. I'm waiting for the next off.
You're counting them.
Yeah.
Could be Oz, could be the word like, could be anything that's a distraction or fillers.
To add to that, I didn't realize how much I did it, because last Sunday I did my first podcast, and I did like a 2-hour recording. I had to skip the whole thing because I'm going to have to edit like every 5 minutes.
But people who have English as a second language will use a lot more fillers. And I don't know, how long have you lived in the United States?
10 years.
Oh, no more excuses. No more excuses then. No. I always tell people there's a translation process that goes on that we tend to have that space.
No, it's all me.
It's just you. 10 years, no more excuse. Anything else that it's just you hate when presenters do?
Not being able to elaborate.
Not being able to elaborate, so they'll make a statement and move on. Or they'll just answer. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's correct. I'm not going to say any more about it. Yeah, maybe their knowledge, they've already hit the shallow end of the knowledge pool right there, so they can't go any further. Yeah, being able, not going deep enough on the topic.
I was just going to re-emphasize on the parking lot, because when I'm in the audience and I ask a question and they say, okay, we'll look at it later, and you don't see it put on a piece of paper or email or something, you know that
so you think they're going to lose it.
Not that important. So.
The other one is if they read a teleprompter.
Well, yeah, that's true. If they're, yeah.
They're stuck
and
on
if
a
it's too
teleprompter.
scripted, if it's too scripted, what else?
Stuttering.
Oh, I'm sorry. See,
You
that's-
see more of
that's
it
a
now
hard
than you
one.
ever have on television, in the news channels. I don't know why, but it just seems to be increasing. You know what I
Trying
mean?
to get words out. That is interesting.
Some people have made it their trademark. Ira Glass is incredible the way he goes on. He does that, it's his trademark, and I think a few people are copying him. I've heard people on This American Life, and they seem like they're trying to be little Ira Glass.
That's interesting. I haven't even paid attention. I haven't noticed that.
It's just recent in the last 2 years.
Well-
It's more and more.
The top 3 things that people will say, and it comes out the top 3 in almost every survey, is reading your slides is the worst thing you can do. And we know that. Second worst thing you can do that no one in this room said, speaking monotone. Speaking in a monotone voice, which is interesting because if you read your slides, you're more likely to sound monotone than if you're talking from your heart and your head. So speaking monotone. And number 3 on the list is too much information on a slide. So if you just look at those top 3, I guess. Although, see, it's interesting, when you're in a tech presentation, I can tolerate more info because I expect meat. I want a meaty presentation. I want lots of info, although I'm not able to read what you were writing up there, what you had up there. But when you have too much information, you will read your slides and you'll sound more monotone. So if you just take those top 3, you can eliminate most of those problems by just crafting your slides well and not relying on text. Give yourself credit for the information you know. I mean, Nora said it best, you have to be knowledgeable first. But once you know that you know your topic, give yourself credit. I think sometimes we have people that come up with scripts and they have their notes and they need to hold their notes. And I say, what would you do if I shredded those notes right now? What if I crashed your laptop and turned it off? Could you still talk to us? Yes, you could. You know your topic. You know, whenever I do presentation training, I ask people, what is the point of your presentation? Just tell me in one sentence, what's the point of your presentation? Such a good question most people don't start with. What's the point? Because some people say, well, the point is to get through 87 slides in 20 minutes. Not the point we're going for. And so just really asking yourself, what is the point? If everything I had crashed, if none of my technology worked, my notes flew away into the mud, what's the point that I had to deliver? Could I talk on that? Because then it doesn't matter when you get there. You'll relax more. You'll be able to use a whiteboard, blackboard, technology, anything because you know your point. And that really helps you come from a better place of confidence of saying, I can wing my entire presentation and I'll be okay. And then my slides become what they're supposed to be, and that's a visual aid. Remember the days we used to put together a presentation and then we'd say, what visuals do I need to aid? Now we put together 87 slides and we say, what will I say in between? You know, it's backwards. And that's the problem. We build presentations that are so reliant on our slides that it's really not a presentation anymore. It's a slideshow, and you might as well just send me the email. Save us the meeting time because you're putting me to sleep. And most people, when they start their presentation, they will say, and I hear this in most tech groups, I've done a lot of work with engineers in presentations, and they'll start presentations by saying, I know you guys can't see this from back there, so I want to scream and go, then what are you putting it up here for? If you know we can't see it. You know, or someone in the audience will know, as soon as you see lots of tech, lots of info, someone in the audience will say, are we going to get copies of your slides? What are they really wanting to know?
Do I have to pay attention?
Can I go to sleep?
Can I leave now?
Whenever somebody asks me, am I going to get copies of your slides? I always go, no. So you better write down every word I say. You better pay attention. And now I know who to watch. Whoever asked me that question, I'm watching you. And then I tease them and go, yes, you get copies, but I'm watching you now. So just looking at the way you craft a presentation and giving yourself more credit, I think is really the key. And so I'm going to just go through some highlight top tips and then really making it more interactive to get what is it in this area that you want more info or less info on. Number one, timing out a presentation. Most people have a really hard time with this. And I don't mean just timing it out, putting a timer, which this to me is one of the cooler things I've seen.
And I didn't use it.
I'm trying it. I set the timer. I thought I'm gonna try. I have the Kensington, and I always carry 2 remotes because it never fails. One, the battery will go dead and it won't work. And these are 50 feet radius, and they're very simple. There's nothing else on them. I think I paid $40 at Best Buy or Staples or something, one of the office supplies. But you just pop it in, and when I teach presentation classes, I can use this in anybody's laptop. There's no software to load, and I'm sure this is the same way. There's just an antenna plugged in somewhere. No. What is this running on?
It's just USB.
Is there a
on the right
USB
side.
pop in?
Yeah.
Okay. So they're really easy to use, but I like the fact that it has a timer in it. But here's even better. If you timed out your presentation, and if it's a big presentation that you have to give, and they tell you have 30-minute presentation, or you have, what are some of the timings that you get to when you present? How long?
Either 20
45
minutes or an
minutes.
hour.
20 minutes, an hour?
45 minutes.
45 minutes. Anyone else have, you have 10 minutes, somebody tells you have 10 minutes to present?
I did go to an audition once, and everybody had to give 10 minutes, and almost everybody was trying to cram an
know.
hour's worth of material within 10 minutes.
Here's a science formula for you. And this is not on a slide, so you better write it down. I'm not like SB, I'm not giving you the answers, honestly. You write this down if it's important to you.
Thanks for the advice.
125 times however many minutes you were asked to speak. 125 words per minute is the average or the average speed we should be speaking when we're presenting. Now, sometimes I'll get excited, I'll get up to 300 words per minute with gusts up to 500, but we're supposed to slow it down to about 125 if you're pausing, if you have interaction. And if I take 125 times a 30-minute presentation, that gives me the word count. That's how many words you can speak in 30 minutes. Now, that may seem really weird, but every time I'm asked to give a presentation, especially if it's a new one, if I have to give a presentation on using technology in our workplace, I give that presentation over and over and over. I already have it timed out. I know exactly how long it takes. I know if I get there and they tell me now you don't have an hour, now you have 45 minutes, I already know what I can pull out. It's already self-edited. But if I have a new presentation, and last week was a good example, I had to give one, and they said you've got 30 minutes. 30 minutes to me is harder to go short than it is to go long. And so I sat down and I started scripting out a 30-minute presentation. Every single word that I thought I was going to say. I highlight and I do a word count. How many words do I have? I do this for stories that I tell. If I have a certain story that I tell to make a point, I type the story up. I highlight it, I do a word count. How many minutes does it take to tell that story? It's the best tool I've ever found to timing out your presentation to the minute. Now, I don't print that script out and bring it with me, but the fact that I took the time to type it up, number one, logs it in my head. While I'm presenting, I now know if I'm going off on a tangent that someone takes me off, I know I'm going to be off. So I know where I need to edit and where I need to pull some stuff out before I even get to that. So timing it out is important, and it can be done as simple as sitting down at your laptop and scripting it out, which another thing that really helps us with is our openings. Because I always look at going, we want to make sure we say our information and not read it. And the whole concept of our reading and our speech is so different in how fast we read and speak that we have to make sure it's said, not read. Or if it should be read, then be quiet and let people read it. If you put up a bunch of information you need them to see, then step aside, pause, read it while they're looking at it so you can time that and then come back in and blank out the screen. I use the blank out key probably more than anything else when I'm doing presentations. I don't want them looking at this anymore. I need their attention back here. So blank out the screen. If you don't have a remote, by the way, now I'm guessing that was similar to being in slideshow mode. If I hit B, yeah. If you hit the letter B on your laptop while it's in presentation mode, it blacks out the screen. And you hit the letter B and it brings it back. So if you didn't have a remote, which I always tell people, get a remote, but if you didn't have one, or if I was projecting onto a whiteboard and I needed to go white, what letter should I push?
W.
W. Look what happens. Is that so high tech? Look at that. So I could, if I didn't have a remote, black out the screen or white the screen out to use it in other ways, and it works on everyone's, as long as you're in PowerPoint. In PowerPoint, those of you who are on Mac, see why we should be PC? I'm just telling you. Yeah, I know. You can use, I know. Some people use something else, yeah. That's true, you have more than. But just looking at the fact, and I'll look a little bit deeper at this in a minute. But your first 60 seconds, to me, is your critical, when Nora said your opening, you don't want to have a weak opening or a weak ending. Most people, if you ask them, what are the first words you're going to say when you get up? They'll go, I know my point. I've got it down. I know my first point that I'm going to make. I go, no, what are the first words you're going to say? I can always tell when a presenter doesn't know their first words because they get up. You see this in every conference. Someone will get up and say, thank you for having me. And the audience, what kind of response can they give you? Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
Usually they stare at you like, I didn't have you. I was told to be here. What are you talking about? Thank you for having you. There's not really a great response they can give you to that. So if I get up and say, thank you for having me, I'm going to get blank stares back. Because that's the appropriate response to that opening line. Thank you for having me. And then I'll go, well, okay, let's get going.
I was wondering about if you have something great to say about that organization, is that a good way to start, or you say, I've always appreciated the work that you guys do?
Yeah, her question is, should we, is it okay to open with great things about the company or some sort of tie-in? A lot of times my opening might be tying into the presenter before me, or something that was covered in, if it's at a conference, then it's something that went on at the conference. But I will script that out. And I will have that as my first 60, because if I have 60 seconds, how many words do I have? 125 words. So your first minute, and the reason your first minute is so critical, your first minute is when you have the most adrenaline going, so you're most nervous in your first 60 seconds. You also will get up and you'll have just getting in the flow, that first 60 seconds of trying, even though you've used a remote or your laptop over and over, it's your first 60 seconds, you're still trying to get in the groove. So have the first 60 seconds memorized. I tell people, if there's nothing else that you memorize your opening 60 seconds. Because once you know that, and if you're really nervous before a presentation, you just walk around in your head, what is my first 60 seconds? What's my opening line? Will it be thanking that company for allowing me to come in and share? Then make it really good. Don't say, thanks for having me. Okay, I guess I'll get started. I mean, that's just not clever. It's like, there's no good response to that. You start with a question. Start with a comment. It doesn't matter, whatever you want to craft, depending on your presentation. I mean, when I do my technology presentation, I start out with a picture of a woman screaming, and she has all Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, all this stuff all over. And I say, how many of you feel like this about technology? I mean, I know what my opening line is. Even if I make something witty before that's improvised, I still have that kind of worked in. But if I have nothing witty, if I'm just feeling unfunny at that moment, it could happen, then I'm going to get up and start with, how many of you feel like this today? I mean, I know my line. And what that does is it starts us off on a strong high note. And we spiral up instead of down. And too many times you can just tell someone's ready to choke because they don't know what to say to get going. So have your first 60 seconds memorized. Yes?
So on that, do you work in your introduction on that point? Or?
It depends on if you're doing your intro or if someone's reading your intro. If somebody is reading your intro, ask them, keep it short. First of all, talking about Gen Y thing, or the Gen Ys, they don't really care what your background is. I mean, which is, I love, you're just doing these quick intros,
but just even your name though, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to get up and say, I've been in business since 1995 on my own, and, I'm the whatever, I could go on and talk about my accolades, and people are sitting there going, prove it. Don't tell me how good you are, show me. That's what I hate about intros. People will type up these 2 and 3 minute long intros. I'm like, please, get the stinking person out here and show me that they're good. I don't want to hear about all your, I want to know that for credibility's sake, and you see that's a generational thing. I think the older generations, we want to see who is this person that they're bringing up here, and why are they speaking and not me? And put that in their bio, but don't spend 3 minutes reading it. I tell people, keep your intro 1 minute or less, and the shorter the better, because get out here and talk about your experience. But if you are saying anything to introduce yourself, craft it in there. That's part of your word count. It's part of your 30 minutes or 45 minutes or whatever. So it should be crafted. And I write up my intro. If somebody has to read an intro for me before I go out, I type it up for them and I say, you know, read this as is or you're free to edit to make it shorter. But don't go to my website and pull all kinds of history about me and get up there and bore people before I get up there. Because now I have to spend my first minute recovering from the boredom that they were experiencing. You know, it's like, and people will do that. They'll get up and, well, let me tell you about Gina. I'm just like, no, that's not in the script. I didn't give you that. Don't read my whole history. They don't want to know. If they want to know, then they'll go check it up, look it up after. Leave them wanting more, not putting them to sleep before you start. Yes.
Gina, can you start out by asking some questions, like especially like I do a lot of, mine is a training class, so I always want to know what they expect from the class and why they're taking it.
And I love the way SB started, having us all raise our hand and ask some questions to kind of do a poll. Now, I would have done, everybody stand up. Only because the goal is you have to keep people awake. Okay? That's your number one goal in your presentation. So laughter keeps them awake, standing up keeps them awake. You know, probably if he wasn't so tired, he would have thought of that. But he was, you know, it's really looking at the more interaction I can have. And now another key to having interaction in the beginning, who is the focus on if I'm asking questions?
Them?
It's on the audience.
Yeah.
So I'm less nervous if I'm asking you questions. It's all on you and not on me. So to me, that's a really good opening. Whether you are at you know, doing a training or a keynote. In my keynote on technology, I ask people, I want to see right now, how many of you do not have a LinkedIn account? Because if I say, how many of you have a LinkedIn account, almost the whole room raises their hand. If I say, how many do not, then I go, keep your hand up, everybody else look at them. And I go, that's their homework. Before the end of the week, everybody better be calling them to see if they've filled out their LinkedIn profile. And then on Facebook, I reverse it. How many of you do have a Facebook account you use for business? Because that number's going to be lower. And then I say, keep your hands up. Everyone look at them. I want you to go to their web pages today, find them later on, and connect with them, become a fan of their business or whatever. So, you know, finding ways to engage the audience is always important. And lots of questions and interaction. I think too much we think I have to present. Now, some of you have to give technical presentations, so there's lots of info you're giving. But I still like to tell people, if you have to give somebody a list of 5 things, why not first ask them, how many of these 5 things can you guess? I mean, what are the things that you think it would take? I mean, you asked us, what do you think you could use the presentation show for? Or no, what do we do to prepare? I mean, he could have said, here's what you need to do to prepare, because he obviously had an agenda. Right? He knew in his mind what he wanted to tell us, because we were off base. He's going, well, that's not really what I meant. But still, by the fact that you're asking for the audience to give you, what is the audience having to do? They're having to think, which means they're awake. See, the key is keeping people awake. And if you have to make them think, but if they have to listen, can they sleep with their eyes open? Yes. SB's doing it right now. It can be done. We know that. So, you know, the key is make their brains work during your presentation. Don't just give them everything, because they don't have to be awake. But if you make them interact with you during your presentation, they're awake. Even if they don't yell out the answer, you ask them a question, their brain will think. They may not think very fast, but it'll be there. It'll kick in there and think. So, and then here's another, to me, one of my top tips is you better make your presentation sizzle. Now, I really wish there was a piece of chalk. Does anybody know? Is there chalk anywhere? I was like, wow, when was the last time you got to use a chalkboard in a presentation? Is that chalk? Okay, now. Let me just draw a triangle here.
Yeah.
Okay? Because there's always a reason to use a triangle. To me, there's 3 parts to any presentation. See, there's really 3 for anything. Just make it up as you go, people. Okay, but there's the stake of your presentation. What would be the stake of your presentation?
The meaning of it.
Yeah, the content. Or the meat. And really we have, if I ask you what's the point of your presentation, that's the steak. Then you have to take that and say, what are the nuggets, what are the pieces of meat I have to deliver? For those of you who might be vegetarians, it's tofu. So, it's still meat. And it's the pieces of your presentation that you need people to remember when they leave. So in training, so what are the pieces of steak they have to know before they leave? In a presentation that I'm giving in 60 minutes or 45 minutes, what do they have to know when they leave? So most people spend most of their prep time on the steak. Interesting thing is there's 2 other pieces to your presentation. This one is Sizzle. Don't you just love that sound? I'm going to buy a chalkboard. Yeah. Okay, Sizzle is what makes the steak interesting or memorable. So it's anything that makes your presentation interesting or memorable. Oh, now see, here's a bad thing. You guys can't even see my chalkboard. Oh, you can kind of see it. Can you see it? You can see it. Okay, you can hear it. That's true. Now, I want you to think of the last time you wrote a presentation that was interesting or memorable, any piece of it. What did they do that made it interesting or memorable? What specifically was done to make it interesting or memorable?
I saw that great video that, what is his name, George
Walther's.
He put the coolest video where we were watching a plane sort of fly across the globe to take us on that.
So doing some video clip. What else makes it interesting or memorable to you?
Humor?
Yeah.
Story or metaphor?
Stories, metaphors, analogies, any of those pictures, a prop,
Humor?
humor, great sizzle. Because when people are laughing, you know they're awake. What else makes it interesting or memorable?
You got a friend who does magic?
Oh, so a magic trick? Remember, you don't have to do all these, but it's kind of like a joke. Not all jokes are funny, and not all magic tricks work. So you better be good at it. Yeah.
Something that I think you're very good at is letting your real personality come across, not just delivering.
And there's a whole presentation I give around what makes people.
Passion.
Well, okay, let's even take that, because I always say what makes people charismatic, and they'll say passion. Okay, well, how do you know someone's passionate?
They have to be.
What do you mean? How do you know if I'm passionate?
Inflection.
So my body looks excited. So what am I doing that makes you think that I'm excited?
Being awake.
Motion?
So really, can we say that if our eyes are open and our eyebrows are up, we look excited?
Motion.
It's true. But do you know you can raise your eyebrows right now and look excited? Everybody just look excited for a second. See? All of a sudden you look more passionate about what you're talking. So if you're talking about something kind of boring, you're saying, this is really exciting. Or you go, this is really exciting. People will believe you more. So, but you're right. I mean, there's something, if you can be excited and people go, yeah, but you don't know the topic I speak on. I go, I don't care what you talk about. You could be given a technical status presentation. Act excited. Raise your eyebrows. Raise the volume.
If you're not interested, why should your audience be?
Exactly. You've got to have, so enthusiasm could be good sizzle. Here's what I want you to realize. Anything that makes it interesting or memorable is sizzle. But every piece of steak better have a sizzle. A lot of times we put presentations together and we don't plan the sizzle. We think, well, that'll just happen. It doesn't just happen. It has to be planned in there. What's the analogy I'm going to give so that they really get it? What's the story I'm going to tell so they'll remember it? What is the prop that I might use? What is the humor I'm going to, a funny line or a story? I mean, I'm excited because next Saturday I get to do this thing where we're watching new speakers give 10 minutes of their presentation, and Tim Gard, who's a comedian, he and I are going to be humor writers. And we're just going to sit there and write one-liners. And I go, I love that, because I listen to other people's presentations. I go, oh, that would have been so funny to say this right here. Of course, if I'm giving it, I don't think of them off the top of my head, but when you guys are giving them, I always can think of funny lines. And they have to be crafted in there. They have to be planned into there. And so sizzle is just a third of the presentation. The other third is the style in which you deliver it. So that's movement, gestures, all the things that Nora already talked about. Gestures, your tone of voice. I have to plan that. I have to, now if I know the room setup, see that is another big thing. If I know the room setup, then I can say, okay, where am I going to have stations? Stations will help me move with purpose. I know I'm using a laptop and a podium, so I know this is a station. I know there's a screen, so I know I'm going to have to point to things. This would be a station. I'm using this. I might want to move over here occasionally to connect with this side of the room, but I plan my stations so I move with purpose to the station. Why would I move over here? Well, I'm moving over here to connect with this side of the room. Whatever, depending on the room setup, you look at it and say, where will my stations be? I do not like laser pointers. And I think someone who has 2 Red Bulls and a coffee thing this big should not be given a laser pointer. Look at this crazy. This is frightening, SB. That's like giving a weapon to somebody.
He also ran out and I had to go get him some more.
Yeah, and then he had more coffee on top of that. A laser pointer on a man like that is a dangerous thing. You guys should be frightened. I always say, give a nervous person a laser pointer, you're in trouble. It's hard to be steady. It's hard to be steady when you're not nervous. Then you're nervous. You're going, oh my gosh. But when you are far away. But I tell people, come up to the screen and point if you have to. Move to the screen station if you need to point something out or use animation. But in tech presentations and you're in the back, then obviously, even on caffeine like that, he had a steady hand. So that was impressive. That was probably my most impressive thing he did. But that's part of the style that we have to plan in our presentation is, okay, what's the stake I'm trying to deliver? What's the content? I craft it. I time it out. I type it up. I word count it. I highlight it. With any humor lines, I highlight in pink on my computer. When I'm typing up my presentations, I highlight any humor line in pink. I highlight stories in blue. I highlight data or facts in yellow. And I look at my presentation as it's written out, and I go, okay, does all the white stuff, can that be deleted? Is there extra fluff here? Do I have too much data and not enough story or humor? Do I have too much humor so it's all fluff? It really helps you look at where do I need more sizzle in the presentation. I have too much steak, they won't digest. They'll choke on all the information you're trying to cram down their throat. So sizzle helps it be digestible, and they'll remember the points at the end of your presentation. Questions on that? Problems with that? You got a problem with that? Yes. Yeah, exactly. You pick it on me? No.
Well, I deal with very technical things in my job.
Right.
Day job. And I need to do presentations for a large number of people. And I have managers to say, you have only 2 days to do this. And there's so much information
To prepare?
that you need to do. No, not prepare, but there's so much information that if you were to decide yourself, it would take 5 days. But they tell you, you have 2 days.
Oh, to prepare, you have 2 days to get ready for this.
No, the content. The
2-day
content.
seminar.
Oh, you have a 2-day
So
conference, 2-day training
So
on this.
If I were to
Okay.
decide, I have 5 days worth of content,
Right.
but my boss is giving me 2 days, what do you do?
Yeah, and part of the thing is, as presenters, his point is, what do? You have so much information. We have the curse of knowledge is what it is. It's the curse of knowledge. We have so much knowledge, and we think it's our right to puke this really on everybody. They have to know all this stuff in one sitting. And I'm going to make sure of it, so I'm going to put 5 days worth of material in here, and I'll just talk faster, and I'm sure we can get through it. And the key is, it's too much steak. They can't learn it. And wouldn't it be better if they came back to you? The key is give them fewer pieces of steak, and they will ask more questions, which means they're engaged. Because when people always say, I always ask for questions, and they just stare at me. Because they can't even swallow what you just gave them. It's too much information. You gave them every single detail. How could they possibly have a question? Give them less, and they'll have more questions. Another thing is really looking at it from a user's eyes of saying, okay, this is a lot of detail, and maybe a lot of it, like you did, great, is I've got a lot of this in handouts later. It's all on your flash drive. I don't need to go through all of this detail here. You'll have, figure out on your presentation, what's the purpose of the presentation versus a handout versus a resource guide versus links, using it right. But I think sometimes we think we have to give more information, and we fall in love with our own material. So much so that we just think this is the best presentation ever. And I get there and they tell me, you don't have 30 minutes, now you have 15. Oh, I can't cut anything out because it's all so good. We fall in in love with our own presentation, so we'll just talk faster. You have to be able to edit stuff out and say, I will give highlights and I will ask for questions. Where do they need me to go?
I got the humor for pink. Oh, what were the other two highlighters you did? Stories?
Oh yeah, I do stories because I use a lot of analogies or stories. So a story might be a little bit longer. It could be like 3 minutes long. An analogy might be 30 seconds, but it still is a story that tells something. And then I have data in yellow. And if I have any facts, data, and I am not a data person. I love technology. I live in that weird world of technology. And I always say, but I'm so undetailed. And I would rather just hear the story. And then I have to realize there are people in the audience who are the skeptics who are going to say, so where did you get that fact? I threw out something the other day about, it's sad that after people graduate, I think it's after they graduate college, at that age, that very few percentage, now I don't remember the percentage that I threw out, that ever go out and read another book, full cover-to-cover book, a very small percentage of people. And somebody said, and where'd you find that? I wanted to go, who cares? No. I said it, write it down. Gina said. Luckily, I didn't. I'll tell you where I found it in my head this morning. And if you read more books, you'd know that. But luckily, I knew where I got it. I go, Dan Pointer. Dan Pointer Publishing has this great website with all these stats about how illiterate we become once we get in the work environment. We don't read anymore. We don't go in bookstores. But I remembered where I got it, luckily, and I thought, I've got to always remember it. Either write down where your sources are. You better have them in your back pocket, because someone in that room is going to want to know. They're going to want to know. So, have your sizzle, but know where you're getting the stats and things that you throw out, because those stake people are there in that. But so, questions on that?
Yeah, actually, I do have a question.
Yes.
How do you work in the question and answer part? Because obviously, this is, we're doing this at the same time.
Right.
I'm guessing with different types of presentations, you may want to have it at the end, or
Okay.
as you go. Or
Yeah. How do you time out if you're going to take questions throughout and have all this great interaction? How do you possibly time that? I literally think through how many questions what kind of my thing is I give similar presentations enough that I know the kinds of questions. Like I knew about a certain time into a presentation, there'll be a guy in a checkered shirt, he's going to ask me this question. And he's going to say, I know how many questions and the type of questions that I'm going to get. But I have to plan that and say, I'm going to guess I'm going to have about 5-10 minutes of good interaction. If I don't, though, I also have a backup plan. I have more information I can go into. I can elaborate here. I can answer the questions that I was hoping you would have asked. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when you ask, which is a really interesting thing, when you say, does anyone have any questions? And people stare at you. Any questions? I always say, wait till it's painful. Go, anyone? Bueller. I need to come up with a better movie, because see, that's even getting too old. It dates you. The younger people now say, who's Bueller? It's on TV Land. Watch it. They do know Bueller. Yeah, they do know Ferris Bueller, because he's a rebel. See, they still love him. But it's interesting because I will wait. What I see people do is go, does anyone have any questions? Okay, so we all understand. Okay, great. Let's move on. And people have questions, but they don't allow them to come forth. So I always say, ask, are there any questions? Better question might be, what questions do you have? Because if I say, are there any questions, that means there might not be. What questions do you have? I know you have questions at this point. And then if there's still silence, I could say, some of you are probably wondering, and I'm going to throw out a primer. It'll prime the pump. Because this is a question I know I always get at this point, I'll be thinking that, so I'll say, some of you might be wondering, well, how do you possibly time out a presentation and then allow for interaction? And that could throw you off. So then all of a sudden someone else will go, oh, I have a question too.
I'm just wondering what you would recommend if you're in a app sharing environment, so you don't have your audience in front of you.
If you're in an app sharing environment, and and how many people are typically on your call?
I have between 5 and
So
up to
small
30.
group. Okay,
So it
small
varies.
enough. Group. If you're presenting virtually, how many of you present virtually? Either over the phone, webinars, anything like that? My favorite thing, this is where you get to draw a circle on the board, Is there a way to make this go up? Oh, right here. No? Lights. Is it? I'm just gonna make you work, Tom. If I know I'm doing a virtual call, now this is where I always tell people, see, you should be meeting in Second Life, because then you wouldn't have to worry about that. You could see what they're looking at. But if I'm on a conference call or I'm on a webinar, before the call starts, I draw my conference table and I write down everyone's name. And I write their name around the board. Now, some people might be thinking right now, well, couldn't you just list their names? I have to see them around the table. So this is just a weird thing for me. And I even put me, and I'll write us all down. Whoever's going to be on that call. And I write them on it. Now what I do is, while I'm speaking, I'm looking at this board. I'm looking at the table. And I'm saying, now Nora, now on your presentation, now what are you going to do with this part here? And I'll say her name because I'm looking at her in my mind. I'm looking at her at the table. And once Nora starts talking, I put a tick mark next to her name because I know she's with me, she's talking. And then all of a sudden, Espy says something, and I put a tick name. I didn't even ask him a question, but he's talking, then Espy talking again, Espy talking again. And then, Tom says something, and then I'm talking, Espy's talking again, I'm talking, Nora's talking. See, now who has checked out? Deb and Kim, they're gone, they're asleep. So I know that I can actually say, now Kim, we haven't heard from you, on this. How do you think you would proceed with this? When I'm doing virtual presentations, I have to see people and I have to know who's engaged. The hard part is, and so in app sharing, I can actually say, now Kim, do you see the part on here because I haven't heard from her? I'm going to ask, and if you ask someone a question that's on a call, say their name first. Kim, do you see that part of it? Because if you say, so do you see that box up on the right-hand corner? Kim was checked out until she heard your name. Now Kim is diving for the mute button and go, I'm sorry, can you repeat that question? And you get that a lot. Save some time here. Say their name first and wake them up, and then ask the question, and you'll get them with you and be engaged. Because that's a hard thing. When you can't see their eyeballs, you have to use their names more often to pull them into the conversation. So anything you're going to say, you would want to start with somebody's name. And I always say, pick somebody who hasn't said anything in a while. And if I see someone that has been talking nonstop, they're kind of derailing the conversation, and then they have something else to say again, I might say, Espy, great point. Why don't you go get a cup of coffee? And I want to talk to the group a little bit here about, what I want to do is validate that person. I really value the input that you're giving us here. Because we haven't heard from Deb or Kim, I really want to hear from Deb. What's your thoughts on this? How are we going to proceed? So that you can let them know. In our office, we always do this because we work virtually, and they know that I write their names on boards, and we do this. So at the end of calls, people will say, "So how many tick marks did I have? How many tick marks? Who had the most tick marks?" And it becomes this thing of being aware of who's talking too much, taking over a call, who's trying to check out, and they know that I'm watching. I'm actually watching them, even if it's on the phone. So yeah, that's a good virtual tip. Okay, we can now cover that. Thanks, Tom.
That's great.
So it's kind of a fun way to do that. But what I want to show us on the speed, the whole thing with the way our brain operates, we talk in normal conversations about 150 words per minute. That's average speed. But when you present, you need to slow down. You need to plan on slowing down. So even if you're a fast talker, if you use this 125 number, that helps you also allow for a little wiggle room, that you'll have some interaction, some Q&A. But here's the interesting thing. Most people will read about 400 words per minute, and that's on the slow end. If you're a fast reader and you read a lot, you're probably about 600 words per minute, and speed readers can go up to 1,200 words per minute when they're reading. So do you see the disconnect if I put up a slide like this, and I start talking? I'm trying to talk and you're trying to read, and what you're saying is if she would just shut up, I could actually read what's up there. But now what I do is I keep talking and interrupting your reading, and then I expect you to remember what I said, and you can't remember what I said because your brain was trying to read and trying to listen to me at the same time. So I would need to put it up and be quiet. I would need to pause. Then I would black out the screen, and I would say, what questions do we have on this? Because, our goal is pretty steep and whatever, So the whole concept of said or read, there's scientific reason for that. You cannot. You are interrupting their reading when they are, when they're trying to read and you're talking. I was going, something just buzzed. But now I see why. Oh, that's cool. Okay. And I always say put up a picture instead of the words and just say, our goal is to accelerate the time to market or whatever it is. Put a picture with our goal instead of words. So it's said, it doesn't have to be read. And then the handout, if it's detailed information, maybe the handout has the details. So put it there. And then timing out your presentation. Okay, here's a couple of the low-tech presentation tips. If you don't have gadgets. Okay, I told you the B to blank out your slide. I've never used this view in here. I find it interesting because I've just never, and probably because I always just have the pictures and the slides and I know what's there. If somebody wants to go back to slide 2, you can actually just hit 2, enter, and it'll go back to slide 2. Go back to slide 12, enter, and you'll go back to the last slide. Go to slide 4, enter. You just hit the number and enter, and it jumps to that slide. And so if you're able to see your slides here, is that all you were doing?
Right.
Or were you clicking on the slide?
I mean, on the number of the slides I can see.
You were seeing the
before
number.
and after.
Yeah. So even if you're in PowerPoint view mode, slideshow mode, I can just go to that numbered slide, and it just pops in there. So yeah, that's helpful if you're not using, but this way, same thing. You're going to that slide number, going ahead. You never want to do because people will always have questions on whatever you're skipping. So, you don't want to do that.
I should just mention that on my site, I actually have a video where I show in more detail, like 20 minutes, how to activate it, how to use it.
Which is great. I want to play around with this and try the timer. I never look at the notes part because I don't make the notes. Yeah, right. But if you need the notes, this is a really cool view of showing everything in the. I mean, I'm seeing the slide up here, and then I'm having a blank area here that if I had notes, and then I have my line of slides down the side. So that's pretty cool on that. But F5 is to start your presentation. So if and I'm guessing I can escape out of this. See, we're in a view now but if you were in PowerPoint mode, the edit mode, if you hit F5, it starts your presentation, first slide. If you're using a remote, there's usually a button you push and it starts your presentation mode and gets it going. And sometimes people don't realize that. Now, if I'm sending my presentation to another group and there is animations in there, and I want them to open it and be in slideshow mode, because a lot of times you put all these great animations, you send it to them, and they never put it out of edit mode. They leave it in edit mode and they don't see the animation. You can go in and save as PowerPoint show. And if you save it as a PPS, then they don't get it in edit mode. When they open it, it's in slideshow mode, and every time they hit enter, the next animation is like you clicking. So that's another lower tech way of doing that. Yeah, just helps you. Now I use the timeout when I'm preparing slides. I will go through and rehearse a presentation, and I go under slideshow, and there's a thing that just says time out your presentation, and then I start saying what I'm going to say on each slide, and when I hit next slide, it captures. Okay, you spent 30 seconds on that slide, and then I go through another one. I might be on one slide for 5 minutes because I don't need to have a bunch of stuff. I might be on one slide 5 minutes and one slide for 10 seconds. But it captures that time, and then I can rehearse it in that time to see where do I tend to go off base. So it's a good rehearsal tool. I don't like running things on autopilot once I'm presenting because then I can't take questions. Which, back to the question of what do? Do you tell people hold your questions? Or do you allow for questions? I don't like to say hold your questions to the end because most people will forget them by the end. Or they get angry because you never answer their question. But if I was told I have 10 minutes to present, and you have a lot of information to cover and I only have 10 minutes, set the stage. Tell people that up front. I've got 10 minutes to give you this information. If you don't mind to please hold your questions to the end, and then we'll take questions. Now people won't ask questions, but what happens most of the time, we get going, someone asks a question and the presenter says, can you hold that question? Now I've killed every bit of interaction that I really want, because no one will be afraid. They'll all be afraid to ask a question.
It's curious, what I do, I don't know if this is right or not, but I have technical demanding folks and they get irritated if I don't say something like you said. So I said, I think I will cover this in the next section. If I don't, and what I do is I put it out on the whiteboard, virtual or physical, and I'll say, can you remind me if I don't actually cover it?
And you tell them, because I only have a limited amount of time to get through all this.
Right.
So you have two choices. You can either cut out some of your stuff so you have more wiggle room, so that you can take the questions and be more fluid and jump around. But it sounds like in your presentations they build and you'd have to stay with the flow without jumping ahead and then coming back. And so having that sidebar would be important. But just letting people know up front, I think, helps. Sometimes we don't tell them that, and then they ask a question and we say, can you hold that question? And if it's me, I get mad. I mean, no, I'm not going to hold my question. Answer my question right now. You know, even if I'm not. Well, I would have said that, but if I didn't, yes.
I kind of, with mine, I ask people to not necessarily hold the question, but to stay on, if they have a question on what I'm talking on right now, please ask, but if they're way ahead of me, like a lot of people, you know, people think differently,
Yeah.
so some people are way ahead of you, and so I say that if it doesn't have to do with what we're on right now, my guess is that we're going to cover it anyway, and so can we wait till that section to get to it, because everything is, you know, when you're teaching something, then it's a little different. But I don't necessarily say don't ask questions. I just say if you have questions on anything that we've covered right now, and then, but if it's way down the road where I'm going to get there, then I usually say we are going to cover that really quickly.
Or you could give like a little, you know, if people want to take you off on a tangent and you are in the middle of, I'm going to just use Twitter boot camp as a good example, because that's one that you can get way off. People start asking questions about things that you know you're going to cover, and there's so much to cover that it'll derail us if we go there now. And you're over here just talking about how to set up the account. You might start by saying, you know what, there are lots of third-party applications you can use, and we're going to go into more detail on those. And I want to answer that. I want to elaborate on that, but because there's so much, you might be able to give a little snippet that will satisfy them, and then later come back. But yeah, there are times you can't.
I really heard I've heard it a couple of times where guys real techie are solid, but very structured.
Right.
And when you ask something, you just can't wait, you know, and they say, great question, I cover that later. Great question, I cover that later. They actually can repeat that without, to me, it didn't offend anybody.
And I always caution people, if you say great question to somebody, make sure you say it to everybody, because you go, great question, then someone else asks a question. Interesting.
That was okay, yeah.
Here's what I thought about that.
How about good question?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying, I just find that another funny thing sometimes. Great question. Brilliant question.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
When we do sales
No one's
demos,
ever asked that.
we're not allowed to say those words at all.
Yeah, because of that. Yeah. I mean, there's kind of a psychological thing that either you're going to sound repetitive, like great question, but it is something I think having a board that you can write it down to just have so much information to cover. I want to make sure I don't miss that. I'm going to write down just in case, tweet deck, so I can come back to that, and then we'll go into more detail on that later. But because we want to make sure we're out of here on time, we're going to keep going so that we can get back on track. You know. And you just have to play with it. Be willing to be fluid, though, where you can, because you want the interaction. And if you kill the interaction by telling people to hold questions, you may wish that they would have been more awake with you. So, yes.
Especially in a longer program, and you want that interaction. Do you ever use ringers in the crowd to ask questions that you don't?
I've now in training, I've done that. Do you plant people to ask certain
Right.
questions? Yes, I have done that in training. I have done things where I will put questions under chairs before they get in the room in a training, and I'll say, "What questions do you have right now?" And everyone just stares at you. Okay, then I've got something for you to ask. Look under your chairs. Everybody gets, all of a sudden there's this excitement, and I'm like, "Oh, is there a prize?" And then look under your chairs. There's a question. I want a couple of you just to yell out your question and take a couple, and then you can use those throughout. Or you could, if you want. I would not plant a question like in a certain part. Can you make sure you ask this question? I would say, a lot of times people ask this question during. I'm going to assume that this question is probably out there, and I'll ask it. Kind of a prime the pump. We have 5 minutes left. What questions do you have at this point? What other steak sizzle? Anyone? Look under your chairs, yeah. You're going, no, I saw her come in late. I know she didn't put anything under here.
understood the description of techno-geek or whatever it was you used, SP, but what is a SPHR and what is a CSP?
Oh, our titles, SPHR, Nora, it has, he's wondering about our titles after our name. I just made CSP up just so it looks smart. Certified Speaking Professional. In the National Speakers Association, there's a process of you have to be a member in good standing for 5 years, belonging to the National Association. You have to have 100 letters of recommendations from clients that you submit within a 5-year period, a certain level of income you make strictly from speaking, and go through, and National has a board that they call your clients to get references on you and a ranking, and you have to rank 9.7 or high. It's a really stringent process that the association puts you through and then you go through that and you're a certified speaking professional, which means, no, no, if you saw me drive here, you'd know it was not Colorado State Patrol. No, and it's one of these things. For years I thought, I have a hard time with titles and status things because I think it could go both ways and hurt you. That some people go, I don't really care about that. But after a while you go, okay, I've been doing this for 15 years. I need to go ahead and follow the association set up these things. And same, and yours is through?
Mine is a senior professional in human resources.
Yeah.
I've been 20 years in HR and organizational development. And for us, SPHR, like a PHR, is an exam. It is to the HR community what a CPA is to an accountant, except that you don't need it to practice. But it is a way of demonstrating a level of knowledge. It's the highest attained accolades you can get as an HR profession.
Yeah.
CSP is for speaking.
For speaking, so it's just the association.
Those are organizations that,
Right, the National Speakers Association is an association for professional speakers. So even to join the association, you have to prove that you make your income speaking.
Although you can be an affiliate.
You can be an affiliate member that you're working towards professional membership. Yeah, and then I always tell them, affiliates, make sure the moment you get your professional status, you document every presentation, because to get your CSP is submitting tons of documentation and kind of proving that yes, and not only that I'm making an income, but I'm building a business that's sustainable, and you have to prove that your business has grown over 5 years, and there's all kinds of, I call baloney, that you have to go through that really proves that you know how to do paperwork versus speaking. But I'm a rebel, and eventually I had an assistant who made me do it, who said, let's just do the paperwork and get this submitted. I'm like, whatever, because I get frustrated. Okay, it's a lot of paperwork. So the rebel in me was like, I don't care. But yeah, it's a nice. In the speaker world, they know what it is, so they get, like, oh, that's so great.
Helpful for meeting planners, right? So
And
they
meeting
know.
planners look for, a lot of times they want a CSP because that shows kind of a track record. But I always say they really want to hear you speak somewhere first, because you can have a CSP and still really suck as a speaker.
It's less likely than if you just
Less
pull somebody
likely.
out of the yellow pages. But
Yeah. But yeah, interesting. What other questions? See, I didn't even talk about, can you believe I did a whole presentation without talking about Second Life? I did not go into that. Yeah, you were pretty shocked. We have a whole side of our business that we do training in Second Life, and we do if anybody's in Second Life or uses Second Life, we do a regular Wednesday meetup. That's just a free meeting for people in education and corporate training and learning, and a business application that we meet. And so we have people from around the world that just pop in and attend these conferences in virtual world technology, and we're doing a lot of the whole drawing the circle on the board. We're working with a lot of companies like Cisco and Sun Microsystems and IBM that are already there and using that technology for their meetings, and you don't have to look and see who's checked out because we see them. And we all go, let's walk to the next slide. And then we look over and we're like, Nora is still over at slide 1. Nora, what's up? How come you're not over here? So there's some really cool technology out there. No. So that's another piece of what we do. But yeah, and then of course, if you want to get a hold of me on Twitter as well, my email's here, my Twitter name, and I tell people really, if you like my business card, just so you can forget, well, whose card was this? Do you ever do that? You leave with a card and then you get home and you're going, I forgot why I said I was going to take their card. So I always tell people, if you want a card, I have it, so that you can later ask that question. Otherwise, connect with me here is probably more useful. But thank you for letting me come, and look at that. We're actually on time. I don't know how that happened with all of us.